Yeah, we can hear.
Okay, sounds good. So what I want to look at now is the practice test. So got a test tomorrow, and it will be emphasizing strings, functions, if statements, and we'll have a question on lists on there too. It shouldn't be hard for you to do something with lists because they're almost exactly the same as strings. So the algorithms are the same. And so let's take a look at, I've got 4 questions on the practice test here. There might be a little more than that on the actual test. But here's what we want to do. So this is selection, so this will be if statements, but it's also a function. So you are going to have to write functions for most of the answers tomorrow. So I want you to be clear about, passing parameters to the function, returning a value from the function, and the fact that we don't do input in the function, we don't do output in the function. So there's no input statements, there's no print statements in the function. We do all of that outside the function. Okay, so we want to write a classification function that will accept one argument. It's an integer representing a person's age. And we're going to look at it. If the age is less than 5, we're going to return the string preschool. If the age is from 5 to 18, including both, we're going to return the word school. And if the age is from 19 to 23, including both, return college. And if the age is 24 or higher, we're going to return adult. And I should probably verify with you again. Are you seeing the practice test problem descriptions on your screen?
Yes, we can see them.
Yeah.
Okay. So the name is classification. My age breaks are 5, 19, 24. Okay, so let's go in the Python. Let's create a new file here. So the function is going to be called classification. And we're going to pass in an age. So let's call it age, and we'll initialize it just to let Python know that this is going to be an integer variable. And then I want to check to see if age is less than 5, return preschool. Else, if age is less than, I think 19 was the next one. Return school. I think 24 was the next one. I have to double check on these, but it's lesson 24. And if it's none of those, return adult. Okay. So under 5, under 19, and under 24. So let's flip back over to Word. Okay, under 5, under 19, 18 is still school, under 24 is college, and then 24 higher as adults. So I'm doing a 4. It should be a 5 probably. We'll test just on the borders. So I'm testing all the border cases, 4 and 5, 18 and 19, 23 and 24. So if it works on the border cases, then it is probably going to work on all of the other cases that are not right on the border. So let's copy that. And let's go into our main program here. Paste it in. And move that code up a little bit. And I need to get that back over to the beginning. So this is my main program now. Let's go ahead and run it. And it should be, looks like I capitalized them here, but otherwise preschool should be school, it is, should be college, it is, should be adult, and it is. So it looks like it's all working on the borderline cases, so it's probably going to work on all the other cases as well. Let's flip back over to Word. Okay. And this is using lists. So I want to write a function called get names, and it's going to take a list of names, strings, and a single letter. And it's going to return a list of elements whose names from the original list begin with the letter that was passed in. Okay, so for example, here's my list, and the first call down here says pass in names and pass in the letter B. So Bob should be returned, Bill should be returned, Betty should be returned, and Brett should be returned. If I pass in a capital B, it should still work. So I've got some capital letters here. Brett was not capitalized, but we should still catch it anyway. If they ask for letters, names that start with the letter D, Dave is the only one, so I should get a 1. There are no names that begin with the letter X, so I should get 0 names for that. Now, this is not returning a number. It's going to return the list. I didn't put the whole thing here. I just said how many should be returned, but it should be pretty easy for us to figure out, you know, that the names on this list should be Bob, Bill, Betty, and Brett. So it's get names, and we get a list, and we get a list of names, and we've got a letter that's going to be passed in. And we're just going to ignore the phone. So I'm going to create a new list. So just like we've been doing every time. Create a new list that has nothing in it. And then every time I find something that starts with the appropriate letter, I'm going to return it. So I want to go through every element in the list just like I did before. So for IN names, actually I'm going to call it name. That's more descriptive. For each name in the names list, so that's going to give me a string. And I want to know if the first character of that name, which is going to be character 0, and I better make sure it's uppercase. So I'm comparing both upper and lower. If the name is equal to the letter, I don't know if that's going to be capital or lowercase either, so I got to do that upper. So if they're equal, then I want to add the name to my new list. So new list equals new list plus name. Now, that has to be a list because it's on the right side of a plus here. And this is a list on this side. I'm going to have a list on this side as well. So I'm going to just put square brackets around it, and that will fix the problem for me. And now return new list. And I need to call that. So let's take our sample code here and copy to the clipboard. And let's go over here and paste it in. And let's do a shift tab to slide that over. And why doesn't it, oh, I called it get names like that. So I'll just change the spelling up here. The Python way is to use underscores. Some other languages prefer this method. Neither one is more correct than the other. They both work. It's just kind of a convention to do that in Python. So let's go ahead and run it. I should get the B names on my first list. And I do, then I should get Dave, and then I should get no names. So that algorithm should look familiar. We create a new list. We're going to return a list. So we got to create a new one that's empty and then build it as we step through our names list. So this is something that we've seen a lot of. You're probably going to see it on the test tomorrow. And so you look at every one, and there's something you have to do with that current element. And what I have to do with it is I have to check the character at position 0 and compare it with the letter that was passed in. And if it is, then I have to add it onto my new list. Okay, let's flip back over to Word. And I've got something with strings. So I want to get the first name, and the string should look like this: last name, comma, space, first name. Okay, so this is supposed to get the first name. It's easy to get the first name because I know it starts right after the comma and the space every time. So an assumption I'm making here is that I'm always going to get a comma and a space before the first name. Otherwise, my function will fall apart. So get first name. So we need to create a new function. And I did that without underscores as well. And I'm going to pass in a name. And it's just going to be a string. So I'll initialize it to a string. And what I want to do is I want to find out where the comma and the space are. So my comma, we'll call it comma, is equal to name.find and comma space. Okay. And so if that is at position 5, where the comma is, then the space is at 6, and the name begins at 7, which is 2 more than 5. So I'm going to add 2 onto that. Actually, let's do, we'll call it start, just to make it a little more readable. And then what I want to return is the name, but I want to return a slice of it, starting at start and going all the way to the end. So let's flip back over and let's try our print instructions here. And we'll tack those on the bottom, and we'll do a shift tab, get them back over the left margin. And so we should get Martin, Abraham, and Bobby Joe. So let's go ahead and run that. And we get Martin, Abraham, and Bobby Joe. Okay. We have one more. This one does not ask for a function. It says just write code that will ask the user to enter 2 numbers called low and high. And after that, we repeatedly ask them to input an integer. If it's between low and high, including both low and high, add it to a running total. And when the user finally enters number 0, we will quit and we will print out the sum. So in the example I've got down here, the low is 100, high is 200, and they enter 100, that should be counted because it is the very first number that we're counting. 99 should not, so I'm taking care both sides of my border case right here on the low end. And then on the high end, 200 is the last one that should be included. 201 is the first one that should be excluded. So I'm checking out my border case on the high end, which is something you should always do. And then they type in a 0, and the 99 and 201 were ignored, but the 100 and the 200 were added onto my running total. So I should get 300 for a sum. Okay. So that is a session. That's not actually any code. That's the output. So let's flip back over here and let's get low. So low equals, it's going to be integer. We're going to ask them to give us the low number. And then we're going to get, you know what? I forgot closing parenthesis. That's why it didn't go back to the left margin there. So then I want to get high. And then I don't know how many numbers you're going to type in. So that tells you it needs to be a while loop. So make sure you understand how to do a while loop tomorrow. If you do a while loop that doesn't start with while true, then you're probably doing something wrong. Okay, so what do I want to do? I want to get a number from the user. So there is no context for this, so we'll just call it and equals. And it's going to be an integer, and it's going to be input, and we're going to ask them to enter a number. Then we're going to check that number, and if the number is greater than or equal to low, and number is less than or equal to high, both of those are true, then it's in between. And I want to take my total and equals total plus n. And you can see I got a little arrow over there, and you can probably figure out what it was as soon as you saw it pop up. Total has not been initialized to 0. So you got to initialize it before you can use it. And this will add it if it's in range. If it's not, it will skip it. And I need to break out of the loop eventually. So if n is equal to 0, break. And then when I fall out of the loop here, what I want to do at the end is I want to print total. Okay. So if I use the same numbers I did in the practice test example, then what I should get here is 300 for a sum. Let's go ahead and run this. Get all the other output first, and then it's going to ask me for low. We'll type in 100, and high is 200, and we'll type in 99. That's too low. 100 should work. Whoops, 100 should work. 201 should be too high, but 200 should work, and then type in a 0 to end it, and I should get a sum of 300 down here below. Okay. So that takes care of everything on the practice test. And the remaining thing I want to look at is the, let's go to our homepage here, and some homework for next time. We are doing our first homework with lists. Let's take a look at the list algorithms here. And this one is pretty straightforward. I don't think this one will be too difficult for anybody. So write a program to ask the user to input 10 integers from the keyboard. So you read it and you tack it on to an empty list initially. And when you get done, you'll have 10 integers in the list. And we want to write 4 functions. List min, and it will find the smallest item on the list. So you look at the first one, and that's the smallest you've seen so far. And then you go through and you compare every other one with it. As soon as you find one that's smaller, that's the one that you save. And keep doing that all the way through the list. List max is exactly the same, except it will return the largest number. The algorithm is identical. It's just that one place you're checking to see if the number is bigger than the biggest one you've seen so far. Another place you're checking to see if it's smaller than the smallest one you've seen so far. And this one will accept a list of integers, and it'll return the sum of all the elements on the list. And this one will accept a list of integers and return the average of the elements in the list, and we'll return a floating point. We're sending it integers, but when we take the average, that will almost certainly be a fraction. And so we want to return a floating point. All that means is use a slash for your division instead of a double slash. Okay. Do not put input or output statements in your functions. The input will be done before you get there. We will pass whatever needs to be passed to the function. It will do what it's supposed to do, and it will return the answer. It will not print it out. We will print it back in the main program like we've been doing in all the examples today. Okay, let's flip back over. And we've got World Series winners is the next problem. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so the data is coming from a file just like Hangman did, but you don't have to worry about that. I will write the code. So we've got a list of everybody who's ever won a World Series game. It started in 1903. And I think, actually, I don't remember who won the first one. I've got the data file, and we can check and see. It goes through 2019. So it's got everybody who's ever won a World Series. And what we're going to do is we need to keep track of how many years are out there. You know, we know that it starts in 1903. And if I run the program this year, it's going to end in 2019. If I run it, you know, a few months from now, after they've had the World Series for 2020, then there'll be an extra row in there. If I run this 10 years from now, you know, it will have 10 more rows in there. So what I'm telling you by this is, do not build the number 2019 into your program. So what do? Well, you count the lines. And so, you know, if it's 1903 and there are 10 lines in there, it's going to be 1903 plus 9. It's always going to be one less than the number of lines. But do not build, the only number you should build into your program should be 1903. And even that should be a variable. And you set it equal to 1903 once at the beginning, and you never touch it again. After you read in the file, you can see how long the list is, and that will tell you what the ending year is. And so, you know, print it out, see if you're calculating the year right. It should be 2019. If it's 2020 or 2018, then you made a mistake. Then what we're going to do is we're going to repeatedly ask the user to enter a year. Obviously, the input's going to be a string. We will check it before we convert it. If it's an empty string in the program, if it's not the empty string, we will convert it into an integer. And then we'll check to see if it's between our starting year and our ending year. And if it is, then we will look up the appropriate element in the list and return it. Okay. Well, if the first item is the year 1903, and I say I want the year 1903 World Series winner, then you subtract 1903 minus 1903 and you get 0. And the 0th item on the list will be the World Series winner in the year 1903. If I want 1910, okay, well, subtract 1903 from 1910, and let me see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It would be item 7 on the list. If you take 1910 minus 1903, you get 7. And so we can go to the 7th item on the list and retrieve it and return it. Actually, I don't know if I said you had to use a function here or not. I don't think I did. So you don't have to return it. You can just calculate it. And if the number is not between 1903 and whatever the ending year is, then you print an error message telling them that there was no World Series that year. Okay. So here is a sample session. If they type in 1902, and that's a borderline case, so that's a good one to try. It comes back and says the year must be between 1903 and 2019. Now, that print statement does not have the number 1903 in it or the number 2019 in it. It has 2 variables in there that get printed out instead. So if those numbers would ever change, the print statement still works. And what year do I want to look up? I want to look up 2020. That's another borderline case. it should tell me that, that's not between 1903 and 2019. If I pick the first year, 1903, the winner was the Boston Americans. And 1994, there was a player strike that year, and they didn't have a World Series. They didn't have a season in 1994. So that is the actual line that is in the data file. 1961 was won by the Yankees. 2016 was won by the Cubs. And then I just press enter to indicate that I'm done. And it tells me that's the end of the program. Okay. Let's go back over to the web browser and let's look at the data file. And it's just a text file, worldseries.txt. And so 1904, they didn't play a World Series. And then I'm going to see the Yankees pop up in here a lot. 1994, World Series was not played. That was the player strike year. And up to last year, where the Washington Nationals were the world champions. Okay. So this file needs to be saved, and it needs to be in the same folder with the same name. It's worldseries.txt as your program. And I did not give you the code. I will give you the code for reading in the data, and I'll give you a function that will read in the data from the file, and it will return a list of all of the names. So in position 1 will be the Boston Americans, and position 0 will be the Boston Americans, and position 1 will be the World Series was not played in 1904, and then so on all the way up to the end of the list. Okay, so I will put a link to that code out there. The function itself is only about 5 lines long, but like I said, we haven't talked about files yet. It might not be a bad idea to take a look at it and just see what it's doing, because the code for reading a file is fairly straightforward. Okay. So that's all that I wanted to go over today. Strongly encourage you to do we all went through the practice test, but I encourage you to go through it again on your own. Go through those problems that were in the notes file out here. I've got some links to some quick guides out here that have a list of some of the built-in functions for lists and strings. We're not doing turtle graphics on the test, but I've got one out there for turtle graphics too. We may do some turtle graphics on the final. So that's it. You can work with somebody on the homework assignments. They're due Monday, not tomorrow. And we will meet face-to-face tomorrow and take the test. So that's it. If you've got any questions for me, you can stick around on Zoom here and ask the questions. Otherwise, just go ahead and log off. And if you got any questions about the test or any problems, you can email me. We could Zoom if you want to. And if you're on campus, I am in my office today, and I'll be here for at least a while yet. So you got several options if you got some questions. So I'll stay on for a minute here, and if in case anybody has some questions they want to ask right now, and then I'll be logging off after we're done with that. So you're free to log off now unless you have questions you want to ask.
For the question 1 on the practice test, I was looking at the solutions for it, and it said to not do elif statements, but then when we went over it, it had like you were using the elif statements. Does it matter?
No, it doesn't. Either way is correct. I just wanted to show you both ways to do it.
Oh, okay, perfect.
The reason you don't need the elif is because if that first condition is true, you'll return. Okay, and you don't need an elif to skip over everything else because you'll never get to it.
Okay.
So I prefer the one without the elif just because it's a little cleaner, I think.
Okay.
But if you look at the 2 versions, there's not that much difference.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
So on the test, I just care about correctness not so much about exactly how you do it.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Devreen, I see you're still logged on. Do you have a question?